So going back to the slave-centric events, why is that important? Well, if we skip down to application support and render jobs as user, it will become clear in a second. So the render job as a user essentially now means that we can run the deadline slave as a particular user, and then actually drop down on Linux and OS X will be running as root, and then we can drop down to actually render the job as the user account of the user who submitted the job, i.e. the render job. So when those files get written back to your file server, you can actually see that although it rendered on perhaps render node 16 of 1,000, so all of those perhaps have a generic account that they're logged in as long as that account has permissions to be able to drop down into the security level of the other user group, i.e. the user account which the job was submitted from, then actually the slaves will write back to your file server that this particular frame, although rendered by render node 40 of 100 or whatever, it was actually written back because it was a job for John Smith, and so it gets written back as John Smith as the person who created and modified last in your file server that particular file. So I'll show you where the render job as a user is in the monitor. So this is on an individual machine basis. We can actually go into the user settings, and we can see here that you can your username here on Windows only, the domain and password, confirm the password, that's all hidden asterisked, so there's no security hole there. And as I said, on Linux and OS X, you would run as root so that you can then drop down into the relevant access level account that you wish to render as. I mentioned styles and fonts and colors earlier, but they're just here as well underneath the configure the monitor, and you can change all the colors and change the font, and indeed the console font to your heart's delight, to perhaps something other than the default colors that we ship with. You can preview that style, you can export, you can import, so you can share styles between users and of course delete them. You can see what it looks like because the preview is here because to actually show those colors we need to just restart the monitor. So if I was to choose light and commit to that change, I would just need to close down the monitor and then just open it back up again, and all those colors will change. So it's quicker just to show a preview to see what it looks like when you're playing with the colors before actually committing to it. And lo and behold, you probably need to put your sunglasses on now with the colors being a bit too glary. But we can pop back in and just switch back to the default, which is the darker colors scheme that we actually ship with in Deadline. I don't need to preview that because I know it looks okay. I know what that looks like, and then just restart monitor again, and then we can see what that looks like. And we're back to the color scheme that's a little bit more relaxed. Application support. With every new version of Deadline, we increase version support. A lot of those are included in Deadline 6.2.1, but we also add additionally support for Corona and Houdini to Arnold as well in this version. And as I was alluding to when I was talking about the event plugins, we now also ship with both Puppet and Salt. So Puppet and Salt are software configuration management or deployment systems, SCM for short. And you can see here that other industry ones, such as on the Windows platform, might be SCCM, or perhaps on more sort of a Linux platform would be CF Engine or Chef or Puppet or SaltStack. And the slave event callbacks that I explained in the last slide effectively allow us to add the ability to add SCM support. So the best possible time to deploy software to your render farm is when you know that your slave is perhaps idle, or so you can then report back to the event plugin that we've introduced for Salt or Puppet, which reports back to those actual server management systems to say, hey, is there in my manifest, my template file, is there any software that needs deploying onto me, this particular machine? If so, this machine is idle because Deadline has just told me it's idle, so we can then react accordingly. And so we're playing really, really nicely now, moving towards in the future with SCM solutions. As I said, we're delivering Salt and Puppet as an initial offering. Adding the ability to support the other three, or indeed any other in-house ones like Ansible or something like that, really it's just a case of perhaps getting in touch with us, or indeed you can add the support yourself because it's just Python scripting. As I said, it fires via the event plugins. So you can see here that we've got Puppet, and we've also got Salt, where we literally just are calling the Salt agent, the local agent, whether or not it's enabled, and we can say, well, perhaps when the job is completed or started, we can actually ask if there's any software that needs to be deployed before the job continues, or perhaps we might want to just submit, here's Puppet, and here's Salt, but effectively we might want to submit a Puppet update job to the queue, where actually this is a maintenance job which will fire once, and the maintenance job is quite specific in that it fires once on each slave in your queue and only once. And so it means that we can tell every single slave, workstation, whatever in your render farm to all effectively fire the Puppet update or Salt update check-in to the master just once, see if there's any software deployment or reconfiguration that needs to take place, and then pull down that information. You can take one step further and actually perhaps use the batch name to define different dependencies, where you actually have different Maya jobs that are perhaps dependent on different versions of V-Ray or Arnold, for example, as a renderer. And then depending on as that job gets picked up by a slave, you can actually then deploy a different version perhaps of renderer based on your software configuration management tool. So it really opens up a whole world of configuration for you.